There we go. Thank you. Has to be done from Computer Central. Good evening, everybody, or good day, and thank you for coming. It's been 2 weeks. We had our first class on this teachings of Zen Master Seung Sahn, Compass of Zen, 2 weeks ago, and we'll continue with the second class today. A quick review. During the first class, I talked about little why Seung Sahn Sunim and how he came to make this teaching, which we call the Compass of Zen. He wanted to teach all his students, even if they had no background, especially if they had no background in Buddhism, the most important teachings of the Buddha that can be used to help our practice and help our life. What we call the bone, what he called the bone of Buddhism. So we're going through this Compass of Zen and as he put it together, and going through the topics that he considered very important for practitioners to be exposed to, so that we can use those teachings and be more successful in our practice, more skillful. Last week we did the first part of Hinayana Buddhism after an introduction, and if I remember right, the first thing is the 3 insights of Hinayana Theravadan Buddhism, and that is the impermanence. All things are impermanent, all things are impure, which means suffering, and all things have non-self. Originally there is non-self. And then we went into some of the details of each of them. And the second main topic last week was karma, the nature of karma, primary cause, condition, result. And we gave some of the teachings Buddha gives on karma. And we will get back to that topic also on Mahayana Buddhism. It's very valuable to understand this is the way the world works. If we take that understanding and then digest our experience, our mind can become very clear. So human beings we're kind of animals. I mean, we have bodies and we have many of the similar desires animals have to survive and to reproduce. But humans have an ability, if it's not entirely unique, it's certainly much more developed in humans than in other creatures. That's the ability to reflect on ourselves and realize there is something enormous going on in this universe, this thing we call life. And we can experience that. And that gives us a spiritual side. So, what makes our life really full? 3 things in the tradition we're involved with are important. First is correct view, and I'll talk about that today. Second is meditation or practice, some kind of practice, some effort that we make that helps our life experience and helps clarify what's happening. And the third is everyday life. Now, if we don't see that our life, even for a monastic, has an everyday aspect to it, and bring that together with a correct view and with meditation practice, if we do bring that all together, then our whole life is a spiritual life. And we never have to feel that it's compartmentalized. This day we do spiritual stuff, and this day I make money and support my family, and this day I play. It becomes full. So today, one of the things I want to talk about is correct view. How do we perceive things? How do we form our perceptions? The first experience our body has, moment to moment, is sensation. There's a sensation. And what I've noticed through our practice is everybody has some kind of a pattern, like a matrix or a lattice of ideas. And we're not aware of it. And we use that to interpret the sensation coming in and make perceptions. So, for example, we rarely, what's the sensation of hitting the eye? Light and color. But we rarely just experience that clearly. We soon make ideas. In our mind, we create forms. The different colors come in, there's something out there, and there's a name put on it really quickly. And many opinions also appear so quickly. And if we understand that this is happening, we can see how we do that in our everyday life. We already have ideas. And actually, often our emotions come from an idea and a sensation. An idea we're already holding and some sensation creates our emotion. That's quite profound because we think, our emotions are so primary. But underneath it, in my experience, there's some idea we have. And if we don't see that clearly, then we will make many, many mistakes in our lives. And even if we want to improve our life, sometimes we can't because we have an idea that is shaping our experience. We're not aware of that idea. We're not looking into it, questioning it. And it's controlling how we experience things. And we made that idea. Even if you heard it from somebody, you decided to swallow it and incorporate it in your system here. So we have to see clearly what those ideas are, what that it's like a crystal. Crystal lays a little form, like there's one or two atoms and they make some kind of form. And then soon everything else that comes in follows that. And it's the same way. So I think I talked last week, and Buddha talks about this in Theravada in Hinayana teaching. First, what is people's experience? He broke down what is our experience. First is sensation. Eyes is light or color. Ears is sound. Nose, odor. Tongue, taste, and body, some feeling, some physical feeling. And the mind has some kinds of thoughts. Okay, first is some sensation. Then we experience them as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. If we practice mindfulness really consistently, we can see how Buddha came to describe it this way. Then we'll notice we are attracted, or there's a sense of attraction or aversion to whatever the sensation was. Then, even going up another level of complication, we like it or we don't like it. Little kids, little babies, they don't think about like and dislike. Something's in their mouth, it's pleasant, they usually are attracted to it, they leave it there. Something's put in their mouth, it's unpleasant, and they feel an aversion towards it, they spit it out. Later, they make ideas of I like, I don't like. Little kid doesn't look at you like, I don't like that. They're just, And if it's neutral, who knows? They may keep it for a little while to kind of figure out, what is this? What is this? Then, after our likes and dislikes, we make good and bad. Each step of the way, we're further from pure sensation and from experiencing pure sensation. And then we really do a final thing that causes so much havoc in the world. We create an ideology. And we use first our likes and dislikes. Okay, that's a little like an animal mind. But good and bad, that's, people kill each other because of their ideas of what's good, what's bad, who's right, who's wrong. And then we make a whole, religion or some ideology, and we base good and bad on something, some intellectual construct. And when we don't see what's happening, and if our normal reaction is like way up here, the first thing that we're conscious of, then we are far from the ground of reality, and we're not going to live in a way that is ultimately beneficial to us and beneficial to others. And if you don't like what's happening, you won't be able to skillfully get out of it unless you begin to see how you're creating this structure. So why do I mention that? Buddha's teachings came from observation, experience, and a very careful analysis of what was appearing. He was like a scientist. What is a human being? Modern science is so powerful because it has taken the world as an object. And then we see a certain way in which it functions and try to control it. But as we're experiencing, we can't. We can to a certain degree, but we can't cover everything. It's just like it's better to get your vitamins by eating vegetables than by eating a pill, which is missing a whole lot of other ingredients that we can't even figure out how it supports and helps that. So, so Buddha's, the foundation of his teaching comes from having a big question, from curiosity and observation of himself, and from having a very clear direction. I want to get out of my suffering and help all beings get out of their suffering. He saw, he was going to be king, top power in the country, much more power than any president has, But he understood even that won't help me learn how to get out of suffering, and then how can I help others get out of suffering? So he got this big question and spent 6 years devoted to just trying things and observing and being curious and experiencing and looking at, trying to understand what was happening. And the lovely thing I think many people find in Buddhism is Buddha said, don't believe it just because I say it. Don't believe it because somebody who's famous or considered holy says it. Don't believe it because it's written in a book that everyone praises. You take each thing, test it yourself, and if you find it beneficial, keep it. And if you find it's not beneficial, then discard it. So Buddha believed in the ability of the individual to self-reflect and to become clear and aware. And this is a wonderful thing. So why do I want to talk about correct view today? Since Buddha, you check it out yourself, but describes very well some of the nature of this world, if we take that teaching and apply it to our life and take a look, does this make sense with my experience? And if it does, it's very useful. What this is doing, Sung San Sunim called it organizing your intellect. It's like you wake up in the morning if you have a lot of hair and it's all kind of disheveled and it can even be knotted up. You can go out and live like that, but you're going to find a much better reaction from people if you comb it or cut it all off. Whatever. And so this is like combing your hair, but it's our intellect. We've already got a whole bunch of ideas, some of which we swallow this life, and many of which we carry in to this life from before. And if we check that against some of what Buddha describes, we may find that having that as a tool to look at ourselves, look at our experience, and check out ourselves is very helpful. So that's where what I talked about last time is so useful. The 3 insights, everything's impermanent. How many of us really deeply have faith in that, have experienced that? You know, everybody wants something permanent. We want our body to be permanent, and then we're shocked when we find out it's not going to be. In fact, even the body I wake up with tomorrow is different than the one today. If you're not so sure about that, look in the mirror and remember 20, 30 years ago what you looked like, and you don't look like that anymore. Name is impermanence. Then we fall in love. Oh, we want that to be permanent, you know. And maybe we have a country. We want that to be impermanent. How many countries have been impermanent? You know, maybe most cultures, the particular organization of it, 300 years, and then it comes apart. Maybe 2,000 years ago, you know, there could be a group in India or Egypt, and it lasts 1,000 years or something. I don't know. I wasn't there. You just read about that. But you want your love to be impermanent, and then there's got to be. I have to be impermanent. So, or something outside has to be impermanent. So we, that's why God is so important for many, many people. It's impermanent. And then, what about me? I have a soul, and God will take care of it when I die. If I'm good, and if I'm bad, He's going to really make a problem. So, and that's up to me. So, impermanence. And Buddha said, even his teaching will be impermanent. One day it'll disappear. But the truth of things doesn't come and go. That's very important. Impurity, everything is suffering. I'm not the only one who's suffering. And if we can understand that, then naturally we would begin to care for the welfare of others. This is one of the main projects the Dalai Lama talked about. What's important in his life? There were 3 things. I can only remember 2 right now. One is encouraging, through all the world's religion, human beings to care for the welfare of others. Develop that in our heart. It's natural. We can. That's one. 1, 2, 2. I think one and two is that's one of them, and the other is showing that this is beyond. I think he called it a secular religion. It's beyond. This possibility and this truth is beyond any particular religion that humans have created. That it's the core and the heart of being human. And the third thing was helping Tibet. So very interesting. So care about the welfare of others. And, if you're in a country, and so many countries have this with lots of conflicts inside, you'll see that there's 2 sides often, and they don't believe the other cares about them. And many times they don't care about the other side. So if we can just develop that, caring about the welfare of others, there's no boundaries there. It would put you in a natural relationship with anyone you run into. Who knows how you will demonstrate it, but just having that motivation is a tremendous thing. And it can come from really digesting the insight into impurity, into suffering. And then non-self. What is that? Okay. So today, following the outline that we have in the Compass of Zen, I talk about the next set of topics. The 4 Noble Truths. This also helps us get a clearer view. But again, check it out yourself. If you don't think it's right, then don't follow it, But the 4 Noble Truths are, life is dukkha. I've heard from many people, it's not so easy to translate. It has multiple meanings, or maybe I have to say it in a few different ways so we get a sense of what it's talking about. The usual way dukkha is translated in English is suffering, but it also means imbalance, unbalance, like never achieving a perfect balance. It means unsatisfactory. So this life will always be, on some level, unsatisfactory. And if you've lived for a while, you see, sometimes you're very happy, you're very satisfied, and then something changes and you're not. And so that's the first. Now, I think Jesus said, the truth will set you free. So if life is dukkha, and that's a true statement, looking for endless comfort is stupid. It's ineffective. It's not going to help you. But if you can accept life is unreliable, then you're free. The truth will set you free. And I remember saying things like that. Like one time we were rebuilding the floor of a building in New York City to make a meditation center and Korean temple. And Koreans had bought the whole building, some students of Sunim in Manhattan, and he sent a few of us down there to tear apart the inside. We first worked on the second floor, and it was an office, and we tore everything down, the walls and everything, and we took everything out, the light fixtures, and it took a couple months, and then built what we wanted there. And I remember up on the third floor, there was still some guy renting the apartment. He hadn't moved out yet. We were going to use all that space. And he came down around midnight, and he was really upset because we were noisy. We worked so much. I must have worked 6.5 days a week, always into the evenings. Sunday afternoon, that was the one day off. We'd go to somebody's apartment where they had the Zen Center Buddha, and we'd take a shower, and then we do, sitting and chanting with them, and somebody give a Dharma talk, and then we go out to eat. That was our one day, one night off a week. But anyway, and we were sleeping in this construction site. This guy comes down around midnight, and he's sort of really annoying. And I think from the back of the room, I said something like, well, why don't you just give him a paintbrush and invite him to help us, And I start going around saying, why waste a sleepless night? And then I remembered sitting many retreats, Kyilches years later, where I would get up and do midnight practice, and I say to myself to kind of encourage myself, why waste a sleepless night? Of course, I wasn't awake, I was asleep, and I used some alarm to wake me up. But it gave me much more try-mind, like, why waste a sleepless night? 500 bows, So this is the truth, If you're suffering in a hospital someday, yeah, it's suffering, and maybe it's big suffering, but everybody will suffer at some time. So if you expect not, then you're going to have a very difficult time dealing with it when it appears. Second noble truth is we create this suffering by desire, and desire comes from thinking. We create this ourselves. And then Buddha describes how we create it. That's what dependent origination is, primary cause, condition, he really broke it down, how it comes about, the suffering, and result is suffering. We do it. And the third noble truth is, so desire comes from suffering, from thinking, from attachment. The third noble truth is, you can put a stop to this. Basically, there's 12 links in dependent origination. That's how you create our suffering. We create birth, old age, sickness, death. And the way to eliminate it is go the other way, And so it's possible. Years ago, Sunim would not be around the Zen Center that often. He was constantly going East Coast, West Coast every 2 months. And even when he was on the East Coast, every weekend, one weekend he'd spend with us, but every weekend he'd spend at a different Zen center teaching and running retreats. When he was there, he would always give a short talk after morning practice and evening practice. And that's when I realized he's teaching the sutras to us without using any of the language of, scholarly language. It's all everyday language. And it was wonderful. But when he wasn't there, sometimes we missed him. And we decided, I think he even suggested it, one night a week, after evening practice, we listened to some spiritual guy's talk. And he said, anybody, it didn't have to even be Buddhist. And so, people would find stuff. It was the 1970s. There was a ton of spiritual stuff going on. And people would find stuff. And I remember one night we listened to this guy. He was a black Christian minister from California. And it was called, and his name was Reverend Ike. And actually, I could give a whole Dharma talk on Reverend Ike because he's a very interesting guy. His basic teaching was, your thinking makes your suffering. It's like basic Buddhism. And he had this saying that he'd love to say, and everybody seemed to love it in his church, and he'd say, if you can think it up, you can think it down. So I remember that, We made it, we can unmake it. So that's the third. In everyday speech, that's the third of the Four Noble Truths. It's not Pali, it's not Sanskrit, it's not Chinese, it's English street talk. You make it, you can unmake it, okay? And number 4 is there's a path. There's a way to do that. Now, from those 4 great vows, something else appears. From those 4 noble truths, the reason Buddha called it noble is it's true. It's relating to all of life. Red light means stop. Okay, that's true too. But it's not teaching you about the whole nature of existence. This is teaching, and this is what makes it noble, about all of existence. And if we can digest it, and it becomes part of our way of seeing life, we will live more skillfully, more kindly, more compassionately, more wisely, and bring benefit to ourselves and others. So it's called noble truths. Out of that also comes the 4 great vows. This isn't something that just falls on us from heaven and we're saved. This is, you've got to accomplish it. And so we have the 4 great vows. Now, one time, I remember Sunim said, your vow is the one thing you carry from this life to the next. So if you vow, that person hurt me, I'm going to hurt them, and you carry that in your mind long enough, you'll carry it right into the next life. But if we make these the great vows of our life, these 4 great vows, and really try to do it in this life, it will also reappear in next life and take us to places and connections with people that help us continue our way, continue practice. So, most of you know the 4 great vows. Sentient beings are numberless, we vow to save them all. Delusions are endless, we vow to cut through them all. Teachings are infinite, we vow to learn them all. The Buddha way is inconceivable, we vow to attain it. It's wonderful, my vow. This is what I vow to try and do in this life. And of course, they sound enormous, but they have a simple meaning, which I want to share right now. Sentient beings are numberless, we vow to save them all. That's our direction. What is the purpose of our life? Help all beings. Not so easy, and just wanting to help isn't enough. But we have a direction. If you have no direction, excuse me, There was a baseball player, Americans will recognize this, from the 1950s and 60s named Yogi Berra. And he looked like a little bear cub or like a I don't know, he was funny. He ran funny, he hit funny, but he was really good. And he had a lot of interesting things he said, some of which don't make any sense in a way. Like one time he said, cut the pizza into 4 pieces. I don't think I'm hungry enough to eat 6. You know, stuff like that. Think about that, okay? Next, he said, so somebody anyway put all these sayings together in a little book. It's called The Sayings of Zen Master Yogi Berra. For example, his technique at batting, at hitting the ball, was terrible, but he was really good. So somebody asked him, Yogi, what do you think about when you're hitting? And he said, if I'm thinking, I'm not hitting. That's Zen, you know. Where'd this guy come up with that stuff? It's just his life. But anyway, one time he said, if you don't know where you're going, you might get there. Which means you'll get someplace and it's maybe not where you thought and not what you wanted, because you don't know where you want to go. So very important to have a clear direction. I always talk in Korea, you know, there's many ways to go from Seoul to Busan. Seoul's in the northern part of South Korea and Busan's in the south. You can go by an airplane. You can go by a fast train. You can go by a slow train. You can take a Mercedes. You can take a crummy little car. You can take a motorbike. You can take a bicycle. You can walk. You can go there on crutches if you have Trimine. You can go there in a wheelchair. Many ways to get there. But most important is you have your directions clear. Even if you have a Mercedes or a Ferrari and your direction's not clear, you might end up in Pyongyang and somebody's going to take your car away. So direction is very important. This is our direction. Help all beings. Very beautiful, you know. So that's why, and Sun Sansini called this human beings' original job. Understand my true self and help all beings. So that job, our original job, is not dependent on our body situation. It doesn't matter whether you're a child or an adult, a parent or a son or daughter, a husband, a wife, partners. Doesn't matter whether you're gay, straight, trans, or every year you alter your gender. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're a taxi cab driver, you're like some of the old people in Korea who make some money by going around on a cart and collecting cardboard, or you're president of a country. It doesn't matter. If we find our human being's original job, any kind of body job's okay, because we're doing our true job. This is just the form in which I'm doing it at this moment. And our body job changes moment to moment. Right now we have a Dharma class job. Afterwards, I don't know, maybe you'll have eat dinner job, or go out drinking job, or play with my phone job, and then you'll have a sleep job, and then you get up in the morning, you have a toilet job, and a wash yourself job, and talk to whoever you're living with, and get in your car. Driving job. Don't you want people who drive to do their human job well? We've had a big loss in our Sangha recently because not one of us, but somebody else wasn't doing their driving job, and it's a tragic result. So find our correct human job, then we can do any body job the correct way for the correct benefit of others. And in that sense, there's no unemployment, except you don't get paid. Number 2, delusions are endless. We vow to cut through them all. That means originally nothing. Everything's originally empty. You can think it up, so you can think it down, because it has no self-nature. The delusions we create in our mind and run our life on, we can take them away. You know, you ever lose a love, or they dumped you or something, and you're totally heartbroken and life is horrible, horrible, and then one day you meet somebody else. And this, and if you're wise, you don't hold on to the way you felt before. You just, devote yourself and your attention to where you are now, what you're doing now. That's because that's also empty. But if we cannot perceive things that way, and it's not easy, of course, that's why we have what we call practice, then we keep having suffering. We can't cut through our delusions, but we can. Number 3, the teachings are infinite. We vow to attain them all. It doesn't mean, the Bible's about this big. The sutras, fill up a library, and all the commentaries too. And it doesn't mean I study every single one of them. The teaching is, what this means is moment to moment. Each moment is a teaching. It's easy to say each moment is new, but we don't approach it with the ability to see it that way. Sometimes I mention how Sunim, when he was teaching in English, he found a few ways to teach, and he liked the wording. He worked on the wording, and he's got a few phrases that you've heard. Probably just do it, only go straight, don't know, don't make anything, put it all down. He had a bunch more that he didn't keep using. He decided they weren't as helpful. He also had a way of teaching original nature to people. And it began with, when you're thinking, your mind and my mind are different. So once in a while, actually fairly often in a Dharma talk, somebody would ask him a question, and suddenly you'd hear him say, when you're thinking, and right away all the old students knew, okay, here comes the tape recorder, heard this 1,000 times, and I know it by heart. When you're thinking, your mind and my mind are different. When you cut off your thinking, your mind and my mind are the same. Good luck, translator. Your don't know mind, my don't know mind, somebody's don't know mind is all the same don't know, because don't know, stop thinking. Stop thinking is no thinking. No thinking is empty mind. Empty mind is before thinking. So when you keep don't know 100%, only don't know. That is before thinking, and it goes on for about another 2 minutes. And so the old students are like, okay, check out time, he's going to be running this one for a while. But every single time I saw him over 27 years, he was excited. I heard him tell this Guji finger story 1,000 times. I laughed when he told it in Korean. I don't understand Korean, but his expression, and you hear Guji, okay, and he holds up a finger, you know the whole thing already. But somehow his energy was right there every time. Doesn't matter whether there were 3 people in the audience or whether there were 1,000. Moment to moment, the teachings are infinite. I vow to learn them all. He just was there each moment. And he was interested in learning. I always felt he's the Zen master in our school because he's the best student. He's learning more from us than we're learning from him. He's figuring out how to connect with us, how to teach us, what do we need, how to guide. And we can do that in our lives, and life is much more interesting. When you feel like there's always things to learn. And that just means being involved, pay attention each moment. Some people say, I'm doing mantras and it's boring. Inside boring is something interesting. But you have to be willing to look at it. Don't shut off right away. So the meaning of the third one is moment to moment. Moment to moment, pay attention. Then you will learn the infinite teachings. And that means you've always got something to do. You can learn your whole life and right into whatever comes afterwards. The fourth great vow, the Buddha way is inconceivable. We vow to attain it. Inconceivable is a very interesting word in English. Someday it would be interesting to see the Chinese and the Sanskrit and everything. To conceive something means to give birth. So when a woman becomes pregnant, we might say she has conceived a child. She has a child growing her. She's giving birth to a child. But it can also be used in terms of an idea. We give birth, we conceive a thought. It's the same thing. So Buddha way is inconceivable. It's beyond conception. It's beyond thought. It's beyond birth and death. It's beyond understanding or not understanding. That's amazing. And we vow to attain it. And what does that mean? Only go straight, don't know. So the 4 great vows, meaning is, first, what is our direction? Second, everything originally empty. Third, moment to moment, pay attention. And fourth, only go straight, don't know. And that's in technical Sanskrit. I just gave it to you. Okay, let's see. Okay, we'll stop for a moment for another commercial. Tonight, I am refreshing myself with poto juice, grape juice freshly made from Korean grapes. Korean grapes are very nutritious. In fact, 2 weeks ago I was 70, my body, Western age. I decided to start this decade with a juice fast. So I've been drinking this for 2 weeks, and black coffee. I didn't tell anybody, the doctor, about that. Just grape juice, sometimes carrot juice, and coffee. And I feel great. I don't know your karma. My karma is less food and more energy. So enjoy. Grape juice from Korea. The fruit in Korea is big, juicy, and sweet. And the best grapes, I'm told, come from Yeongdong in Chungcheongbuk-do. Although I don't know if these come from there, but this is good. Try it sometime. Okay, back to our program in our class. Okay, so what is the Eightfold Path? Buddha said in the 4 great vows, there's a path.